Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and every day I get to share a piece of history that I think you'll find as fascinating as I do. Today, we're heading to Halifax, Nova Scotia on December 6, 1917, and I need to tell you up front, this is a difficult story. It's about the morning two ships collided in Halifax Harbour, triggering the largest man-made explosion in history before the atomic bomb. Nearly 2,000 people died instantly, 9,000 were injured, and a significant portion of the city was obliterated. And here's what troubles me most about this moment. This disaster was entirely preventable. Understanding how it happened, how a series of small decisions and communication failures cascaded into catastrophe, teaches us something crucial about how complex systems fail and why clear communication can literally be the difference between life and death. Picture this. It's the morning of December 6, 1917. Halifax is a busy wartime port. The harbor is crowded with ships, merchant vessels, warships, everything moving supplies for World War I. At 8:45 a.m., two ships are navigating the Narrows, a tight channel leading into the harbor. The SS Mont-Blanc, a French cargo ship, is heading into harbor. The SS Imo, a Norwegian vessel, is heading out. They're on a collision course. And here's what makes it catastrophic. The Mont-Blanc is carrying 2,900 tons of explosives. Picric acid, TNT, gun cotton, benzol, enough explosives to supply the entire Western Front for weeks. She's essentially a floating bomb. The ships signal each other. There's confusion about who has the right of way. The Imo maintains course. The Mont-Blanc tries to maneuver. But the harbor is crowded, the channel is narrow, and neither ship can turn quickly enough. At 8:45 a.m., the Imo's bow strikes the Mont-Blanc. Here's the thing that I always wonder about. In those first moments after the collision, did the crew of the Mont-Blanc realize what was about to happen? Because they knew what they were carrying. They knew the danger, and they knew that the collision had sparked a fire. Let me build the clock for you, because understanding the sequence of events and where the system failed at every step reveals something important about how disasters unfold and how human error compounds in complex situations. Think about it this way. The Mont Blanc was designed to be as safe as possible given her deadly cargo. The explosives were stored properly. The crew was experienced. They were following procedures. But the moment that fire started, they had maybe 20 minutes before the ship would explode. What do you do? Here's what the evidence tells us. Captain Amy Lemedec and his crew tried to fight the fire initially, but the benzol, a highly flammable fuel, was burning on deck and spreading rapidly. They realized quickly that the ship was doomed. So they made a decision. Abandon ship immediately, rowed ashore, and warned everyone to get away from the harbor. They rowed to the Dartmouth shore, shouting warnings in French. But here's where communication failures began to compound. Many people didn't speak French. Those who understood the warning didn't fully grasp the danger. And most people in Halifax had no idea what the Mont Blanc was carrying. Think about the position people on shore were in. They see a ship on fire drifting toward the piers. It's dramatic, spectacular, a morning spectacle. Windows and docks along the harbor fill with people watching. Parents call their children to come see. Firefighters respond, boarding the fire tugboat to fight the flames. Nobody tells them they're approaching a floating bomb. I find myself thinking about those firefighters. They were doing their jobs, responding to what looked like a ship fire, probably thinking about the damage the burning vessel might do to the wooden piers. They had no idea they were rowing toward their own deaths. At 9 hours, 4 minutes, and 35 seconds a.m., and we know the exact time because the explosion stopped every clock in Halifax at that moment, the Mont-Blanc exploded. The blast was beyond anything anyone had imagined. The ship vaporized. A mushroom cloud rose over a mile into the sky. The shock wave flattened everything within a half-mile radius. Windows shattered miles away. A tsunami wave swept across the harbor. A piece of the Mont Blanc's anchor shaft, weighing over half a ton, was thrown 2 miles and landed in a field. Nearly 2,000 people died instantly, incinerated, crushed by collapsing buildings, or struck by flying debris. The entire Richmond neighborhood was obliterated. Ships in the harbor were destroyed or damaged. The explosion was so powerful it created a wave that swept inland, and so hot it ignited fires across the northern part of the city. But here's where the horror compounds. Halifax was hit by a blizzard the next day. Survivors who'd lost their homes were trapped in the ruins during a snowstorm. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Medical supplies were limited. Communication with the outside world was difficult. The city was devastated and now buried in snow. And yet, and this is important, people responded. Boston immediately sent a relief train loaded with supplies and medical personnel. Other cities followed. The international response was remarkable, but the coordination, the planning, the systems for handling a disaster of this scale, they barely existed. Now here's what the investigator in me wants to examine. How did this happen? What were the failures that led to this catastrophe? The collision itself was the result of confusion about maritime rules of the road, poor communication between ships, and the challenging navigation of a crowded harbor in wartime. Neither ship was clearly at fault. Both captains made reasonable decisions based on incomplete information, but those small errors led to collision. The real failure was systemic. A ship carrying that much explosive material was allowed to enter a busy harbor without adequate warning systems, without cleared channels, without emergency protocols. The harbor pilot who guided the Mont Blanc knew what she carried, but that information wasn't widely shared. There was no evacuation plan, no warning sirens, no system in place for the catastrophe everyone hoped would never happen but should have planned for anyway. Think about what this reveals about how complex systems fail. No single person made a catastrophically bad decision, but the system, the machinery of harbor management, ship navigation, wartime logistics, and emergency planning, that system had gaps. And when multiple small failures aligned, those gaps became fatal. We're still making versions of those same choices today, and I think this is where the story gets especially relevant for us. Right now. Look at how we manage risk in complex systems, how we handle dangerous materials in populated areas, how we plan or fail to plan for low probability, high consequence events. Halifax teaches us about cascading failures, about communication breakdowns, about why every system needs redundancy and why it probably won't happen is never adequate risk management. Here's what fascinates me. We've had chemical plants explode near residential areas. Trains carrying hazardous materials derail in populated towns. Industrial facilities leak toxic substances because safety systems failed. And every time we do an investigation, we find the same pattern. Multiple small failures, inadequate communication, insufficient safety margins, emergency plans that existed on paper but weren't actually functional. The pattern repeats. East Palestine, Ohio, a train carrying toxic chemicals derails. Beirut, improperly stored ammonium nitrate explodes in the port. Texas City, a fertilizer plant explosion. Tianjin, China, a chemical warehouse explosion. Different places, different times, same underlying pattern. Dangerous materials stored or transported near populations without adequate safety systems and emergency protocols. Think about it. We know these disasters can happen. Halifax proved it. Bhopal proved it. Texas City proved it. But we keep making the same calculation. The risk is low. The cost of maximum safety is high. It probably won't happen here. Until it does. Here's what troubles me. The lessons from Halifax are clear. When you have dangerous materials, you need multiple safety systems, clear communication protocols, evacuation plans, and adequate separation from populated areas. You need to plan for the worst even when you hope for the best. But we keep cutting corners, deferring maintenance, accepting risk on behalf of people who don't even know they're at risk. I find myself thinking about this a lot, because as someone who worked in law enforcement, I understand the tension between practical risk management and absolute safety. You can't eliminate all risk. You can't prevent every possible disaster. But you can design systems with redundancy, with clear communication, with emergency protocols that everyone understands. Halifax had none of that. When the Mont-Blanc caught fire, there was no system for warning the city, no evacuation plan, no way to quickly communicate, get away from the harbor immediately. People died because they didn't know they were in danger, and the people who did know couldn't effectively warn them. We're still facing that problem. When chemical plants are located near residential areas, do the residents know what chemicals are stored there? Do they know what to do in an emergency? When trains carrying hazardous materials travel through populated areas, are communities prepared? Do we have effective warning systems, evacuation plans, and communication protocols? The evidence suggests we often don't. We have regulations on paper, but implementation is inconsistent. We have emergency plans that haven't been tested. We have warning systems that depend on multiple people doing exactly the right thing at exactly the right time, which is exactly the kind of system that fails under stress. So as we think about that December morning in 1917, when Halifax was forever changed by 20 minutes between collision and explosion, I think the question for us isn't really about maritime safety or wartime logistics. The question is about how we design and operate complex systems where failure costs lives. I think about the captain of the Mont-Blanc making the decision to abandon ship and try to warn people. He did what he could, but the system didn't support his warning. I think about the firefighters rowing toward the burning ship. They were brave and professional, but nobody told them what they were rowing toward. I think about the families watching from their windows, fascinated by the spectacle, not knowing they had minutes to live. Nobody woke up that morning planning to cause a disaster, but the disaster happened anyway because the system had gaps, because communication failed, because we treated a low probability event as a no probability event. Here's what the investigator in me has learned. Complex systems fail in predictable ways. They fail when multiple small errors align. They fail when communication breaks down. They fail when we don't plan for the worst-case scenario because it seems unlikely. And they fail catastrophically when dangerous materials meet human error without adequate safety margins. We can design better systems. We can require adequate separation between dangerous operations and populations. We can mandate multiple redundant safety systems. We can create and test emergency communication protocols. We can plan for disasters we hope will never happen, but all of that costs money. It reduces efficiency. It acknowledges that the worst can happen, which makes people uncomfortable. So we compromise. We accept some risk. We cut some corners. And usually, nothing bad happens. Halifax reminds us of what happens when our luck runs out. I always come back to this principle. Respect every person for who they are and never judge without evidence. The people who made decisions that led to Halifax, the harbor officials, the ship captains, the planners, most of them weren't negligent or malicious. They were operating within systems that had inadequate safeguards. They made reasonable decisions based on incomplete information, but reasonable decisions in flawed systems can still lead to catastrophe. The great philosopher George Santayana once wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And here's why that matters today. Halifax taught us that complex systems handling dangerous materials need multiple safety layers, clear communication protocols, and emergency plans that actually work under stress. Yet we keep locating chemical plants near residential areas, transporting hazardous materials through population centers, and accepting risk on behalf of people who don't know they're at risk. Every industrial disaster since Halifax, from Bhopal to East Palestine, reveals the same pattern of cascading failures and inadequate safety margins. If we cannot remember what Halifax cost, nearly 2,000 lives in an instant because warning systems failed, we're condemned to repeat those failures with different chemicals. Different cities, but the same tragic results. The question isn't whether accidents will happen. The question is whether we'll build systems that prevent accidents from becoming catastrophes. I'm Richard Backus, and this is the Daily History Chronicle. Tomorrow, we'll explore another moment that shaped our world. Until then, think about the complex systems you rely on every day, and whether they're designed to fail safely or to fail catastrophically. Because that's what Halifax teaches us, not just about ships and harbors, but about how we manage risk and whether we value safety enough to pay its price. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe. If you really enjoyed it, then please tell a friend. I hope you will join me again tomorrow for more of our shared history on the Daily History Chronicle.